Good afternoon, good morning for those of you who are joining us online from the islands. Goedemiddag. Our program will be in English, but if you have any questions and also during the discussions, if you are feeling more comfortable speaking Dutch, do not hesitate. There will always be the possibility for translation. My name is Wim Manuhutu. I'm very happy and privileged to be your host of this afternoon. Heritage Reflections 2023, when we are here together in the beautiful public library of Utrecht to think, to work, to think through, to talk to each other about two important concepts, also for the heritage domain. So not only for society in general, but definitely also for the heritage domain, positionality and community building. And as we live in interesting times, I am sure that there will be much to talk about, and we call upon you to share your experiences, your opinions in a sphere of mutual respect. Obviously, this is a safe space, but also in an atmosphere of openness, so also the willingness to listen to one another. And as we are awaiting the final result of the election for our Senate, let's set an example for politicians in general, right? So first, obviously, I would like to call upon the stage the director of the Mondriaan Fonds, Mr. Eelco van der Lin. And for those of you who are very savvy on social media, we have a couple of hashtags. Hashtags here 2023, Heritage Reflections. I made my first mistake already, forgot the S. Mondriaan Fonds, and also erfgoed. So we do expect a lot of tweets. Keep it positive. But first and foremost, please join me in welcoming Eelco van der Lin.
Which one do I have? Hello? Yes. Hello, welcome to here, Heritage Reflections. A warm welcome to everybody who came to Utrecht on a very sunny day, so we really appreciate you being here. I'm Eelco van der Lin. I'm the director of the Mondriaan Fund, and the Mondriaan Fund is the fund for art and heritage. And normally when I have a conversation with people when discussing art and heritage, art is reflected upon as a very dynamic thing, something that shapes our future. And heritage is described as something from the past, and quite often the word static comes into play. People see them as objects that are there, have been there forever, and will be there forever. It's true that to a certain extent, heritage is of the past, but at the same time, it's definitely not static. It's a very dynamic idea. Heritage is defined by us. We keep changing. Our society keeps changing. And as a result, heritage keeps changing. Is there a... and sound keeps changing. Heritage also changes because what you do with it, how you will take it further. You are the heritage professionals of the future, and you will decide what heritage will be like in the future. And to cater in that, we have organized Heritage Reflections, because this is a place where you come together, whether you will discuss heritage, where you will redefine your ideas, redefine your thoughts, and as a result, will shape the heritage of the future. Because you're here, heritage isn't static. And today we'll discuss positionality and community building. And we'll do that because, as said, heritage isn't static. It also depends on the position it's viewed from, the position you have, the position you come from where you've developed your ideas, your thoughts, and your visions. And on why heritage is of value and of which heritage is of value. It all comes from a certain position, and you will study and discuss that today. Heritage will also change when it's given a new future, when it's being taken to new communities, when it's being shared with other people. Today is also a place to discuss that. How can we reach new community? How can we form new communities? And how will that change heritage in itself? I hope it will give you great insights. I would like you today to also form connections with each other, but also with some very special people. And for that, I would like to ask a few people to stand up so you get to know them. I would like to ask Rapti, Lara, Talita, Lotte, Lise, and Minouche to stand up, and please just stay so that people can actually see you. Because it's not only that they're wonderful and nice people, but they're also people that are going to help you to change the heritage of the future. They are the head of heritage and the policy officers of the Mondriaan Fund, and they are here today for you to help if you have any questions concerning anything the Mondriaan Fund does or can help you with. And one of those things that we possibly could help you with is something that will come into play very soon. We have an open call for erfgoedstarters, in English, heritage start, a possibility, a subsidy possibility for institutions to hire young heritage professionals. Closing date is June 12th. So in case you're in the category, find yourself an institution, tell them the Mondriaan Fund has money, they will pay my salary, hire me, and tell the institution to apply for it first. Of course, there are some conditions. And keep an eye on the date. The 12th of June is coming very soon. We're doing this today in a community in itself, the Utrecht Central Library. I hope, is that the English title? The Utrecht Central Library, is that the, that's okay. And I'm very happy that the director of the Utrecht Libraries, Deirdre Carasso, is here today as well, and she would like to welcome you following this as well. We are very grateful we can be here in this beautiful building in the center of Utrecht, filled with knowledge, wisdom, and future generations. But before I pass the microphone, I would also like to thank a few other people. I would like to thank Nama Abdi, Erfgoed Young, Bureau Burdo, Rapti Minima, and Noura Habab for organizing everything today, because as you can see, it's been quite a production. And of course, I would like to thank all the speakers today that will talk you through today. But before that, I would say give them a warm welcome and also a welcoming welcome to Deirdre Carasso.
Welcome in the City Library in Utrecht, Central City Library. International research shows that nothing or no one is trusted as much as a public library. More than government, politics, business, media, and even more than healthcare, friends, and family. I think the explanation for this assessment has a strong basis in the often impressive experience that many people, maybe you too, have had in a library as a kid. And many children and young people every day now have the same experience. There they could and still can dream away or discover the world in a place that is not home, but where they know their way around and find a safe space. But whatever the notion it is rooted in, the library as a trusted and a reliable space is worth its weight in gold in this time of polarization, fake news, and distrust. And then, of course, today the question is, are libraries neutral? Today's program is about among other things, about positionality. Thanks. Who you are determines what you know about the world. Your identity and experiences form your perspective on it. A library, this library, is made by the people who work here. So no, from that point of view, the positionality, we are not and cannot be neutral. But we do strive to be independent, onafhankelijk. Luckily, we don't have to be activists as libraries in the United States today do have to be. We strive to be independent because a library belongs to everyone. It's a public meetings place for all residents of Utrecht, and they come in large numbers and in all their diversity. The Utrecht Library has 92,000 members. 1 in 4 Utrechters are member. More and more non-members are using the library. Our library counts 13 libraries in all the boroughs of Utrecht, and we were visited more than 1.2 million times last year. And there's always room for improvement, but together the visitors already form a nice cross-section of society in terms of age, education, social and cultural background. Something that many organizations in the cultural sector still have to work very hard for. And many of our visitors feel ownership and co-responsibility for the library. The library is seen as an essential basic facility. 10 years ago, people declared the library death, or coming to an end, but today we are alive and kicking. But that's another story. I think it's important that libraries in this society, where everybody judge each other very quickly, carefully maintain an independent position. This means that despite the fact that we are getting more and more tasks from the government, such as the Digital Government Information Point, IDO, we should not become a government institution. It also means that we should not be tempted to mix the library with commerce, such as honoring a request from a bank to open a counter in a neighborhood library where a bank branch has closed just around the corner. And independent also means that we ask as many different voices possible to be heard. Here in Utrecht, the risk is that we, to put it bluntly, are offered too much program with and by socially active left-wing people for left-wing people who, apart from a few details, already agree with each other. We see it as our task in these times of increasing segregation and bubbles to stimulate the active citizenship of those who are not yet participating, as well as the conversation between people who think differently. Not an easy ambition. In addition, we are also trying to make libraries more co-creative with Utrecht residents, not only in terms of program, but also in collecting, in furnishing, and in communication. This will help us to be of lasting significance to an even greater diversity of Utrecht residents and to remain better connected to the needs of a rapidly changing world. But at the same time, it's becoming more and more balancing with these many new partners and many new tasks to remain that independent and trusted place we cherish. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Deirdre, for a very important talk also about the importance and the central role of public libraries in our society. And yes, I still remember the time when libraries were proclaimed to be on the way out, but fortunately we are here in a very vibrant place in Utrecht. And also thank you very much to Ilko for these very gracious welcoming words. And before we continue our program, perhaps also a word towards our online audience. Those of you who are joining us online, if you have any questions or if you have any comments later, please use the hand to identify yourself, and we will give you ample opportunity to participate not only in our plenary session, but also later on in the breakout rooms. And I will tell you more about those in a little while when we proceed throughout the program. As you might have noticed, our program has undergone several adaptations because due to personal but also medical circumstances, some speakers had to cancel. And from this place, we do wish them a speedy recovery, but also strength in difficult times. Therefore, we are extremely happy that she's with us here today, Sila Ardjosemito-Jethoe, who is the Deputy Director of Fonds Creative Innovation, 5 locations in 2 different cities. She's also an anthropologist as well as a sociologist and has a long track record of investment in researching, but also working with this notion of positionality, diversity, and inclusion. So for her, these are not buzzwords that only came on a couple of years ago. This is something that she embodies, but also really is an expert on. To read out your impressive biography would take quite some time. So therefore, read it on the website. And Sila has promised us all an interactive keynote. So yes, do make notes, but be prepared. You will have to work too. Sila, the floor is yours. And please join me in welcoming Sila.
No pressure. Thank you. First and foremost, let's have the guys do their work. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining, and thank you for having me, Mondriaan Fonds. It's really nice to be here and also to fill in some gaps. That's why we have a lot of interaction for you today. So because of course it's not just about having this lecture in time and speaking out, but also speaking up. And I expect all of you, so no pressure, to join into that. So my name is Sila Ardjosemito-Jethoe, and Wim and I actually go back quite some time. I met him here first when I was still lecturing for one of my students who had like background in same Fay. I was teaching there, and he did a project and a program for Wim, I think, still for the Molukse community. Anyway, nice to share, because it's all about sharing today. So positionality. I was thinking, how can we actually discuss positionality when we don't discuss our own? So in that sense, when we're looking at positionality, we're thinking, of course, about what that actually means, right? And how you kind of look at your own positionality, also in the way that you are working, who you are, in what way you kind of perform, because we are all performing every day. So I will pick out some things which I think are very important to my positionality all the time. Like 1, I'm the youngest daughter of 14, which always comes into play, which makes known that you really need to speak up to be heard and all of these things. That's why I'm here on this stage, I think, at times. But also, I have a double colonial backgrounds, which always comes into play because people always want to know where you are really from. And then they never take into consideration that, I'm born and raised in Friesland, like born and raised. So when I say, yeah, Friesland, it's never enough. It's always about where you're really from. And then, okay, yeah, my parents are from Suriname, but then it doesn't interconnect, because usually when you say Suriname, then people think, oh, it's usually the African Suro community that's associated with that. And then it's always, where are you really from? And then I have to go back like history on history on history. And then I'm like, I don't have time for that. I was here for this meeting. So the positionality actually always comes into play, right? And then this idea of neutrality within the positionality is also something that we need to discuss. So let me tell you a little story, because I have time. The one thing that I like to share is maybe this, because I hold it dear. And you think, what is that? because I could choose University of Leiden. I could choose to say something about being like a supervisory board member of Mauritshuis and all of that. But I choose that because, of course, all of these things are things that I do. But in 2020, my eldest son, turning 18 this year, but back then was still 15. We were walking, having these hikes, like, you know, all of us, because we had nothing to do because it was Corona time. And on one of these hikes, he asked me a question on the murder of George Floyd and how that affected him, and that he looked up a lot of things on YouTube already, and that he saw the whole thing and what it did to him. And I was kind of shocked that he was like so involved into that at one hand, and on the other hand, of course, because we live in an information society and everyone can see anything at any time because we have these magic boxes in our hands constantly. I was walking there with my youngest, eldest, and with my husband, like a family walk. And he started saying that how he was in shock and how he, you know, even when he was 15, you know, he already had his share of where are you from and can I touch your hair and whatnot. So, but I was still in shock because I thought, oh my God, yeah, it didn't even come to my mind that I had to prepare him for not just the reality of his being, but the reality of being of others that would affect him, from his positionality to the other ones, right? So we had a conversation, and then we started to talk, and he said, yeah, I'm listening to podcasts. Can we talk about these kind of topics together? And then maybe others can learn from that as well. So can we create a podcast? So while we were walking, I ordered a mic and I called a friend, and they created a logo, and the next day we started. I just want to say that when positionality comes into play and you really want to do something, you can do something. Just have to think about what you can do and with whom and whatnot, but don't make it more complicated than that. If you think you really need to do something, then do it. So we're going to have a conversation about what you're going to do. But this was one of the things, right? This was one of the things that we started doing. We created this podcast. They came up with these topics that they want to discuss. They invited friends to talk about race. It was something, and it was, you know, but it was also just in our house. It was with one mic, and we were just sharing the mic because, you know, we're not really technical in that sense. But it was really nice to do it. You know, we came up with good conversations about, you know, what kind of is dear to us? What are we confronted with? In what way do we address these things? It's also like positionality has also something to do with, I had to go to Spain this year for work, and my husband was dropping me off at Schiphol airport. And then whilst we were driving there and we were coming up to departures, he put off his cap. Now you're thinking, why would he put off his cap? Because of positionality. He doesn't want to become a part of the framework that people actually do ethnic profiling with. It doesn't have to do anything with the cap, but the way the positionality in yourself in relation to others influences your being, right? So it's all of these things. Like we are kind of thinking about it all day, but if you are not thinking about it all day, you don't have to. That's a big privilege. So we're also going to discuss the privilege. Anyway, the program for today. So we're discussing what is positionality, and I use a couple of frameworks, and I hope a lot of these are very, very, very familiar to you. And then we're coming to the myth of neutrality, right? And after that, we're going to part 2, and then Wim is going to help me out because we're going to have a conversation with you. We have a room for dialogue and questions, of course. And, you know, you can ask me questions, great. I do not have the book with all of the answers, because if, you know, the answers would be that clear, we wouldn't be having this talk today. But let's see what we know together. And then we share some final thoughts. So let's start with any questions now? No? Okay. So what is positionality? I just gave you a couple of examples like in day-to-day life. But let's start with the equity and justice first, because I think when we're looking at equity and justice, then there's still a couple of things we need to address, because if we're discussing equity, we should also discuss inequality. We should discuss the idea of equality. We should discuss the idea of equity, and then come to justice, right? So let me go through this. I love these drawings. They're from the Giving Tree. If you need to find them again, they're also on the sheet, but you can find them online because everything is online, right? So what you can see in the picture is you have like the tree, and let's say the tree is the system, okay? And we're all working in systems in one way or another. We're part of that. We're part of that in our day-to-day life, but we're also a part of that when we're looking at work, when we're looking at relations that we have outside and in, and when we're looking at, let's say, our whole nation state. So we're always a part of some kind of system. It could also be your family system in that sense. But let's say the tree is a system, and since we're talking work, let's say it's our work system. You can see that the tree is kind of bent in one way. So it's when you're looking at it on the left side, yes, sorry. And you can see that the person on the left side is benefiting because the tree is bent in a certain way, a little bit more from that system than the person that's actually on the right side, right? And this is because the way systems are constructed. So when we're looking at the construction of systems, then we have to look at who is building the system, who is sitting at that table, and from what positionality are they building that system. And usually when you build a system, you build it for you to work. Which means that if not everyone that's going to use that system in the future, because they're using it in the future, they were not actually a part of building up that system, which means every system is crooked in that sense because the users of the future did not help build that system. So you can see that the system will bend to attend to the needs to the people who built the system in the first place. Right? So when we're looking at that, you can say, for instance, when we're looking at education, for instance, like 100 or so years ago, the system of school was not built for women. So what did we do to correct that system to be able to address the issues that were regarding women into schools, right? So we can have like all of these different types of examples, how systems were built, not for the people that were going to make use of that system, but for the people that have built the systems. Okay, so when we're thinking about really, how to equalize the grounds, we think, okay, in the sense of equality, we say, okay, we give everyone the same type of support, and then we're okay, we're good to go. But if the system was not working for you, and everyone gets the same type of support, then you will see that the system is still lacking, right? Because you didn't change the system, you're just giving support to everyone, which means the people that were already benefiting from the system are still benefiting from the system, and the people that weren't maybe are a little bit closer to making use of the system in a more equal way, but they're still not there, they fall short. So then we're thinking about equity, and that's why I really like the idea of equity, because it's a constant. You're saying in equity, you give people that benefit less from the system because they were not a part of building the system a little bit more on support in whichever kind of way to equalize it and to say, okay, now we can make use of the system in an equal way. But did we then change the system? We didn't. We did do something right, which is right to think about, okay, how do we equalize the grounds? But we didn't change the system. because changing the system is the justice part, which means that it's also a constant process. We need to be able to see, okay, how do we change our policies? How do we actually change our organizations, our representation in the organization? How do we voice the voices that are numbed, et cetera, to be able to change the system? So then when we're changing the system, it's also a constant process, because then we are sitting at the table. And did we think about people that might use that system in the future? So it means that we need to be very alert on, okay, this is not done at some point. We are never ready for something. There's always new changes to be actually taking into account, and then we can move on forward, right? So it's a constant. Any questions on that? Could be, no? Okay, so since we're talking positionality, we also think about diversity, inclusion, and equity, and everyone has to do a lot of, like, it became such a buzz, like Wim said earlier, like everyone is now joining into, and making it like a model that we can also benefit from in some sort of way, right? But the idea of inclusion, equity, and diversity in a workforce is, of course, that we all belong somewhere at some point, and that we feel that we're comfortable. Now, I myself do not really believe in, let's say, safe spaces unless they're really constructed to be safe. And that has a lot to do with how are we accommodating, and do we recognize the stories that are being told, and whatnot, right? So I believe in brave spaces. We really need to be very brave to speak up loud, and, think our own actions and rethink what we're doing. So when we're looking at inclusion, then we're really thinking, okay, we really need all of the perspectives, and we really need them to count, all of them, all at once. And then when we're looking at equity, we discussed equity a little earlier, right? We really are thinking, okay, how can we make sure that everyone is accommodated in such a way that they can actually participate fully? And when we're looking at diversity, then we're saying, okay, a broad range of identities, which is all of us and more, are actually represented in our organization. And then we account for what that kind of belonging idea kind of means. But if we do one without the other, then we kind of have a fallback, right? We can say, okay, if we do inclusion and equity, then you can say, okay, if there is no diversity, then there's a lot of similarity, right? And it's easy to be inclusive when you're the same, quote unquote, right? So you really need the diversity aspect of it, because like, if you look at, for instance, I was, born and raised in Friesland. I went to school there for the longest time. And it's been said, like, no, we're really comfortable with each other. And I was like, I'm not really comfortable. And it's like, oh, but it's just you, right? Just one person. The idea of inclusion is, of course, oh, okay, then we kind of need to broaden up our horizons and see how we can make you also comfortable in where we are at this point in time. So inclusion and equity without diversity is very easy, I would say, because you don't have to think about the other. You don't have to think about who's not being represented. You don't have to think about who's not comfortable. Anyway, so when you're looking at inclusion and diversity, if you have those things, sounds really good. But if you don't have equity within that, then it means that it results in that you kind of go by the ways of the dominant group, which is kind of, divert by who is making the decisions, who's sitting at the table, who's creating the systems, right? If we don't have to think about equity in that sense, then it's very easy to be inclusive and diverse. As is, if you are looking at equity and diversity without inclusion, then you're looking at, hey, we have equity and we have diversity, but then you have like cultural assimilation, which was the longest time also a preferred idea, right? In Dutch we say, doe maar lekker normaal, right? So in order to be equals, you have to be the same. So even though you are diverse, but if you act and do the things I do, and then you're accepted, and then you're normalized, and then it's okay. So all of these things separately do not work. You really need the whole palette. Okay, so when we're looking, so keep this, all of this in mind. I know it's a lot, but keep it in mind. So when we're looking at positionality, it's about the lens that you have like throughout the whole day, and being actually aware of that lens. Because everyone has a specific lens that they filter their world through. So also the work that you're doing. So when we're looking at positionality, you're really looking into the socio-political context, and your whole identity is kind of built upon those ideas, right? And then you see that if you realize that that's what your ideas are built up, then you can also kind of deconstruct where your biases come from, right? Were you raised in a city? Were you raised with a lot of diversity? Is it common to you? Is it not common to you? What is actually the diversity that you hold in yourself, like the diversity in the diversity? Were you raised like me in an upper part, in a small village, et cetera, were you raised in a village? It all kind of constructs the way you actually fill your lens, and then you kind of filter that through, all of the information that's coming through is coming through that lens. So what we're saying is that positionality in that sense influences your whole prospect on the world, not just your work, but actually everything. So it affects research, it affects teaching, it affects leading, policy making, making your decisions for, let's say, what do you want to curate? What is the topic of an exhibition that you're actually striving for, and whatnot. So we're saying this lens that you are actually filling the whole time. If you do not know that you're doing that the whole day, that's actually how you filter all of your information, then you kind of are on the spectrum or on the end of that neutral territory, that idea that I don't have to think about these things. No, nay, not even that you're not even have to think about these things. You don't even think that you have to think about these things in thinking it. So being very aware and creating this awareness within ourselves that, oh no, I do have something to bring to this table. I have my own positionality in that sense. And it has to do, for instance, with race, with gender, with socioeconomic status, with your ability status, with your citizenship, with your sexuality, with your beliefs, etc. If you understand that, then you can start from there, because then you actually know, okay, well, if I start here, what do I actually have to look at to understand the whole spectrum, right? And the whole spectrum is a lot, but at least a little bit more than where you were just coming from, because you're just one person. Okay. So it's about filling in the blanks. So we're looking at like the ways differences in the social position and power shape the identities and access to society, right? So in the core, you can say, okay, what are the things that I do not have a lot of influence on when we're looking at where my cradle was, right? In what type of family or socioeconomic class or gender or whatever. There's a lot of things that you, in the beginning, did not have a lot of influence on. But then you start filling in the blanks. And the blanks are usually things that kind of come to you, you go to school, you socialize. So the idea of positionality is actually from sociology, yeah? The idea of we are all constructed in some sort of way, and then we build from there. So whatever our creed, our social network is, the community that you're growing up and where you are reflecting yourself, seeing yourself reflected in, all of these things kind of make up this idea of what your position, your starting position is. So when we're looking at all of these parts of our identity, you can see in that construction, if you try to deconstruct it, that you can actually see, okay, well, my ideas that shaped the way I think about other people are actually founded in the way we are brought up. in the things that my parents said about others, in the way I did or did not recognize myself in the images on the television, or in the commercials, or in the streets, or in the positions of, you know, directors and whatnot. So if we can see that our starting point kind of is our biggest filter in the beginning, then you can start adding on perspectives for yourselves to see, okay, I need to have a larger range. Okay, so your positionality can change over time, because it's the influence that you have on your positionality to understand, okay, I need to add on more things to my positionality to be able to do a better job, for instance. You're doing all a great job, of course, but then better. Now, how does that link to intersectionality? I'm sure that you already have like maybe read or, you know, come to the term of intersectionality earlier, but it's nice to see it in a different kind of framework. It was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw like in 1989 already. It's really a very long time ago, but it kind of became a little bit more normalized here in the world of diversity and inclusion, like I think about 10 years ago. So when we're looking at intersectionality in the sense of the idea of positionality, you can see like the purplish dot in the middle is about your unique circumstances. Yeah, the amount of power that you have in the unique circumstances of you. So where are you born? Who are your parents? How are they related to structures of power? Are they related at all in structures of power or not? Do you have a certain amount of privileges or not? And how does that relate to your cultural identity in that sense? So that would be the core, right? So if we go back to positionality, that will be the lens, the first lens, the first circle to fill in. So then the second one is like an individual identity that's built up, right? That has to do more with your social status, and you can of course move from one social status to another. I mean, if you study hard, or if you have like a very entrepreneurial point of view and your business is doing well or whatnot, then you of course can climb the ladder of a social status. Or you can look into like the history that you hold, the citizenship that you have, or also the skin color, because that comes into a little later than the core, because in the core, then you're still in your core family still. Right. And then, of course, skin color can also be a little bit complex in that sense. But let's say not in that sense as if yet. So let's say the pink and purple are still about your own kind of built up identity. One with the core that you're born into, and the other one in relation to others, right? A broader spectrum. But then when we're going into the orange, then you can see, okay, that's who you are in interaction to society, in interaction to the systems that we are all a part of, in interaction to actually others in a communal space. Then all of the isms come into play. How do we organize ourselves then, right? Because intersectionality is, of course, how do we meet each other in an intersection, right? Do you see all of me? No, probably not. Because the idea of positionality is, of course, I know my positionality. I have to think about it all day, so I understand who I am, where I am, in what way I am, and how I speak, the way I speak, and whatnot. I know all of that. I know that I'm educated. I know I have a good job. I know all of these different things. But the moment, and now all of you know as well, because it's well shared. But the moment I step out of this space, right? The moment I step out into this world, what is left of all of that positionality and interaction? And that's exactly where intersectionality comes into play, right? Because when I go outside of this space, I am a woman, and I am a woman of color. And then we have to think about, okay, in that interaction, my whole positionality is not being seen. So in the interaction, I must brace myself to be gifted or not gifted with whatever the other person projects on me, because their positionality might have a lot of biases because of the way they're brought up, the systems that they were a part of, the examples that they have seen, that I have to encounter in that sense, even in workspaces where my positionality is known, right? So I'll give you an example because I think examples work very well. Also in Corona time, I was working at Leiden University. I can say it out loud. Nothing against Leiden University. It was really nice to work there. Disclaimer. I was sitting there in like, it was relatively early on when I was just, started working there. And I was sitting there and it was still all online because it was still in Corona time. And then I was sitting there as an advisor on diversity and inclusion. And we were online and I was being introduced by this colleague and I was like, okay, great. I was so excited for everything. And we're sitting with three directors, and then everyone was like introducing themselves. So I introduced myself as well. And then my colleague said, no, tell a little bit more about what you did and all of that. And I was like, okay, yes, okay, I'll tell a little bit more. So I tell a little bit more about the 20 years of experience and the writing of books and doing research and whatnot. And I thought, okay, great. And then the first question that I got after that was, but what's your background? And I was really like, I know what you're trying to ask me, but then you have to say it. So I was like, I just thought I shared my background, in the context of the meeting. and then she was like, no, I mean your background. And of course, because it was Corona time, I was sitting in my living room and I had like a big painting behind me and I was like, oh, you mean this? And I started telling like an elaborate story about the painting and how I got it from the seller because, and because it was Corona time and I just went there. I was like, okay, I'm taking this space, whatever, I will fill it with my stories. And then she's like, no, that's not what I mean. I was like, okay, then you have to say what you mean, because then we can discuss it and make it awkward, and that's fine. And then she's like, yeah, because we can see you're not from here. And I was like, here? Where is here? And, because I'm sitting in my house and I'm definitely from here. And you could see like the tension building up. And it was kind of nice because I was sitting in my own space. That was a safe space because, it's controlled by me. But the space online was, of course, becoming more and more awkward because now she had to voice what she actually meant. Because in her positionality, in her ideas, in her realm, I could not possibly be Dutch, right? Because of what she saw. Even though we are there, we did the whole introduction, we shared, a little bit about, what we studied and all of that. In her idea, it could not possibly be that. And then I said, oh, that's what you're asking. Okay. And then I said, oh, we're also then going to everyone's origin story. Then maybe we should postpone the agenda and just get to know each other. Because I think that will take up a lot of time. Because in that moment, of course, if I would go into that invitation, I myself would become the topic of the conversation, not the partner in the conversation about a topic. So in making the question a topic that we can all share our stories and our positionality in that sense, then the topic would be, oh, we're sharing our origin stories. Great. But I'm not going to become your topic of conversation because it mutes me. It doesn't make me an equal partner in the conversation. So, and this happens, of course, a lot of times. So when we're looking in the in this sense to intersectionality, it's always about what do we meet in an intersection? And even though I know my positionality, I know who I am, the other person only sees this bit of my positionality. And then because of the biases we have, we fill in all of the blanks rather than actually having an idea and understanding, okay, we're here to do this, right? Our topic is this agenda. We're discussing so-and-so. We need, in this context, we need this much of information of each other. And then maybe in another context, we can have another type of conversation about this type of context and about this topic and about this idea. But only when we're doing that in an equal way, right? So I wouldn't suggest going to your friends and say, hey, where are you really from? Because we're friends. No. Are we discussing our origin stories? Then yes, of course. Okay. Any questions on this part? Or things that you want to share? We have space. Yes. I'm not sure if we have, if we can hear you or, oh, thank you, Mada.
Hi, thanks. I wanted to ask, you spoke about spaces as well, and I'm thinking especially what you said about having an immigrant background and these questions around, where you're really from, that your positionality, does it also change depending on where you physically are?
Yeah, definitely. Of course, when I'm walking in Brabant, where I work every day, which is, as they say here in the Netherlands, beneden de rivieren, beneath the rivers. It's, of course, a different type of idea, because when you are at your workplace, you can actually, you fall into the trap that people, all of us, that people understand that you are there because you're working there and that you have a position in that job that you have, right? But then also, sometimes the positionality of the other person in their biases takes over. And then when that happens, then even though you have a position, you have the job, you are in a conversation about the job, you are creating in that job, then still the positionality of the other person sometimes decides that you are actually just your skin color, or just what they can see of you in the now, not what they know of you, right? So when we're going back to your question, is can your positionality change from context to context? Yes, it can, but it's always in relation to the intersections that you meet others with, right? If I walk in Breda or Den Bosch in one of the locations, everyone knows that I'm the vice dean. Everyone knows, because that's my job and that's a position of power. And of course, in the position of power is always also, oh, this person is also about my job and whatnot, right? But then in the intersections, and I have had a lot of encounters in these intersections, that people kind of forget that part of the positionality and then just focus on what they see and the biases that come along with that. So it's quite hard to break out of it at times. Is that okay? Question of answer for you in that sense, or yeah? Okay. Anyone else on this? Yeah, in the back and in the front. Oh no.
Or not? Yes. Okay. Thanks for your talk so far. You mentioned earlier this question of who will use these systems in the future. When I think about this, I still have a bit of a blurry image. Could you maybe give a bit of an example of what this kind of exercise of imagination looks like? How does this become concrete to imagine who are the future users of a system?
Yeah, so we're talking about sustainability, right? If you're rebuilding systems or if you demolish. Thank you. Then if we're looking at that, because you kind of demolish to improve, right? So you kind of break some systems down and then try to build it up with new blocks. Then you really have to reimagine, and that's really something that we all need to try to do, is not just reimagine who is going to make use of this system, but how are we creating space for others to join in to rebuild that system. So I would say it's not reimagining just who are these people of the future, but how are we building systems, and within those systems, systematically making sure that there is always space and room for others to join in and to start rebuilding, because you need those different perspectives. And it's really hard to forecast what these perspectives were. When I started working in diversity and inclusion in like in the 2000 beginning, early, like 2002 or something like that, then there was not even an idea on diversity, inclusion, and equity yet, like in our vocabulary. It was just diversity, and it was usually about immigrants. It was not about the intersection of, it was just about color, actually, and then maybe the migration and the status and the whatnot. And then later on, of course, because it's weird here in the Netherlands, of course, we classify people very much, we categorize very quickly. And I think our society is kind of built on those blocks that we categorize because we try to understand what's going on. And if you don't fit that box, then we create a new box and then you have to fit in there. And what we're actually trying to say is kind of, can we unbox all of that and just create space where people can be? So coming back to the question, do we need to reimagine who's going to use that system? Yeah, a little bit, because we can look into the future a little bit. And some of us are already in the future, and some of us are kind of, trying to catch up in that sense. Because I had a conversation with my youngest son, he's like 15 turning 16, and he said, so I was trying to be the cool mom, the open and embracive mom, the mom that has the diversity and inclusion and equity down and all of that. So when he went to secondary, I said to him, yeah, and if you fall in love with someone, doesn't matter if it's a guy or girl, and then he said, yeah, or transgender or, non-binary. And I was like, yeah, and all of that, So in the vocabulary of young ones, they already are in that future of understanding that there is more than what we are actually brought up with. And I like that idea. So just add on perspectives, I would say, talk to the younger generations and you will see a little bit into the future, which is the future for us and maybe the now for them. But we are now, of course, together building the systems already, so we can take that into account, I would say. And then next to that, make sure that there is always space for more perspectives. I think we can do that systematically. If we create space, then there's always room for that one other perspective. That's my answer, I think. And there was a question here up front. Yeah. How are we going to?
Speak up. Thank you very much. I'm Sophie van Doormalen from the Rijksmuseum. I was wondering, you talked about the first stage about justice and equity, and I'm just wondering how the awareness of positionality plays into arriving at that point of equity and justice. Is it a starting point? Is it a tool to reach justice and equity, or where do you see positionality?
Yeah, so I would say it's never arriving anywhere. It's just being on the go constantly, because we're learning as we go, and we are also kind of falling back as we go, because some people. So I see. Does anyone watch Star Trek or something? Anyway, I would just want to make an analogy. So if you have like Star Trek, you have like this time continuum. Some people in that time continuum are here, and some are here, and some are here. The people that are here are not waiting for the people that are here or there. The people that are in the middle, they're kind of trying to catch up or moving backwards, could happen. And the people that are here, they will never catch up. So I'm not going to wait for them, right? For the changes to be able to develop themselves, and that we have like this more open space where everyone can add on. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, when we're looking at the systems that be and the social justice in that and equity within that, then you can actually always say that when you're trying to write up policies, because this is about changing the system, right? We have this example of course, the ethnic profiling by the Marechaussee at Schiphol Airport, actually, and that they actually made an amendment on Article 1, which says everyone is equal, and et cetera, and then make an amendment to say, no, but if you're working at the Marché, you really need to be ethnically profiling because it's part of your job. And then someone subpoenaed that, and now they're turning it back and say, oh, no, you cannot do that. Right. So the idea of that system is that we, in our policies and building up policies, et cetera, we understand our own positionality, our own privileges, our own ideas, and make it a part of what we're doing. In the least sense that we are aware of it and we speak up. We say, hey, I am a white woman, I am educated, I know this and that, and therefore I don't know a lot of other things. So for all of these other things that I don't know, I need other people to come in. That will help with building up this new like policies, ideas, and kind of righting a wrong in the system, I would say. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so the myth of neutrality, because this is actually where we're going with that, actually maybe also with that question. Here we see the same kind of circle idea, but then filled in, right? The blanks are kind of filled in. So when we're looking at identities, you can see like there are a multitude of identities and we carry that all day through, right? But it shouldn't feel like a burden in that sense. I would say it should feel like something that would help you. So for you, it's like maybe understanding and identifying which social identities you have, right? It could be anything. The blue in the middle is something that people could see right from the get-go. And everything else is the colorful rainbow that we all are, but no one sees. So I would say this is what you really need to understand. How do we fill in our own blanks? And then do we leave room for others to fill in theirs? Right? Okay, so I have 5 minutes. And I have a lot of things to share still, so. Okay, I will share you one story and then we'll go through the others. Okay, so about positionality. So I was working with this group, really great group, like great group. And they were like this classical singing group. And I don't know if you know this movie, it's like Der Müde Dood. It's like a movie from 1922. And it was about the Spanish flu and people dying. And it was really like relatable, you know, looking at Corona and all of that. And it's a silent movie. And then this classical singing group decided to kind of, you know, do a do-over and then sing with the movie playing. And it was a really good thing. But in this movie, there were a lot of racial stereotypes, like a lot of them, like a lot. I was actually helping them with their policy on diversity and inclusion, and they invited me to this premiere of this movie and the screening and everything, and with them singing, right? And I was sitting in the front with my husband, and yeah, they sang so beautifully, and it was aesthetically very pleasing. This film was really good if you put it in the context of more than 100 years ago, et cetera, et cetera. I'm loving it. Except for the racial stereotypes, but I was thinking, I will see you next week. So after the performance and everything, I went up to them and said, oh, I loved it, really, you know, great and everything. And the only thing that I said was, I said something along the lines of, yeah, we have to talk about the stigmas. It would be good to have a conversation about that. And then in the evening, I got like a text message, which was like a page long with, this is the first time that we actually realized that the stigmas is something that we should have done something with, because, and it's just because you were sitting in the front of the row, and then obviously whilst we were singing, we're thinking, this is really weird, and all of that. And it's like, so for the white audience, it was not weird, but for us it was. So we had a conversation on that, and then they created like a whole full side program with that, with dialogue sessions, webinars, with larger disclaimers that on the stigmas that you were going to see, and that they do not support that and all of that. And they did it in one night, created the whole full program. So the next, and then reprinted all of the booklets and everything. So the next show that I did was not in the same kind of framework, but the fact that they didn't see it was because of their own positionality, of course. So the questions I had for them was like, how did it come about? How did you ensure the multi-voiceness of it? Why was no thought given to the reproduction of stigmas in the first place? Why was a different choice made later? And what made that choice so urgent for them at that point? Was it us? Or was it something that they had to deal with? They didn't have to deal with it for us. I would be fine with having a conversation on it. And what was the final adjustment adequate in that sense? So there are a lot of examples like that we create things, we don't think about our own positionality, and in that sense we kind of miss out, right? The idea of that we are neutral beings in creating is just weird. Why would we be neutral in that sense? Okay, so this is another example which I don't have time for, but it's a good one. So if you find me in the break, then ask me about it. And also we think about accessibility, maybe, you know, tactile, it's really nice that you can kind of feel colors in that sense. Then we did a little bit of the interaction already in about this. So we're going to do this. This is your room for reflection. I think you can take these questions with you in the conversations and in all of the talks that you have. What do I need to know about my positionality in relation to my work? How does positionality influence my professional outtake on curating work, my ideas on quality, the chosen subjects for exposition or exhibitions, the art or the art form? And what steps do I need to take to be able to actually notice where I'm coming from and in what way? So I would suggest you start with writing a positionality statement. Start with you first, with everything that you do in your job that has to do with, you know, creating and making space and whatnot. Start with this. Who am I in relation to the work that I'm doing, the exposition that I'm holding, the power that I actually have, right? Who am I in relation to that? And how does the who affect who I am, right? How do I approach the topic, the interaction, the manner that I conduct the researches, and what have I done to account for, acknowledge, and who do I mediate my influence on this research? Okay, so this was my time. Thank you very much. I leave you with this quote, which I love, 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 which is, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. So let's face it. Thank you for your time.
Sila, thank you so much for an inspiring, very rich, multi-layered lecture, also inviting us and provoking us to think about ourselves, right? This is all about positionality, but also to relate this to systems and organizations and structures, because it is not only exclusively about individuals. It is about how individuals interact in a broader system. I'm very happy that you also brought out intersectionality, and obviously for some that is a controversial term that immediately would put you in a box, obviously, but you gave a wonderful explanation and elaboration. And I do think that you gave some foundational ideas and concepts that we can all use when we later in the program go to the different breakout sessions. And the positionality statement that each and every one of us has to do is beautiful homework. And I think it is important, not only for you as you are present here and are with us online, but basically this is something that all your colleagues, but also your directors, if you come back and then you have to report about this wonderful meeting, you should basically ask your director, you write a positionality statement and let's talk about this, right? Blame me, not Sila, if you get blowback, right? Our next speaker Martin van Engel, will be joining us online. He's an expert in the field of diversity and inclusion within the cultural domain. He has worked with the Van Gogh Museum and many other cultural institutions, advising them on their inclusion programs. He is also a member of the board of advice of the Moore Museum and is a member of the National UNESCO Committee, as well as involved in Fonds 21, Fonds 21. And let me just check and then have to take off my glasses, obviously, because of my age, the Amsterdamse Kunstraad. And so, Martin, it's great that you are with us, and it's great that you are willing to share your expertise and your experience. And because you are joining us on screen, can I ask for an extra applause for Martin van Engel?
Thank you, Wim. Many thanks for the invitation to tell you more about diversity, inclusion, but also the culture. And my presentation is about the culture. I would like to share my screen. Let me see. This is my first slide. Again, thank you, Wim. I hope you can see my screen. Let me see, something is not working properly. Yes. It's always difficult when you're not present at the venue itself. Okay, this is my first slide, people. Again, many thanks for the invitation. And Wim already introduced me. My name is Martin van Engel, diversity advisor. And I would like to start with this first slide. And the first slide is a quote by one of the founders of Daily Paper. And his name is Jefferson Osei, and Jefferson is in the middle of this picture. On the left, you can see Hussein, and then you have Jefferson, and then Abderrahman. These are the three founders of Daily Paper. In November, the 14th of November, there was a UNESCO event in Woerden. And it was an event about heritage, intangible heritage, but also the importance and relevance of street soccer culture, hip hop culture, bubbling culture, all kinds of subcultures in the Netherlands. And at a certain point, Jefferson said the following. He said, a lot of doors were closed to us, which we had to kick in ourselves. We don't want generations after us to experience that too. And I asked him, because it was like a panel discussion. And I asked him, who do you mean with us? And he said, well, with us, I mean the culture. And at that point, I was very interested in what the culture is, his definition about the culture, and also the closed doors that he was talking about. So in this presentation, I would like to give you more information about this term, because I found it that interesting. And actually, I've been working with the culture for years. And this term is so important. And also what Jefferson is saying with this quote is so important. And at the end of the presentation, I would like to give you a message, or in Dutch, a boodschap, a message, about why this culture is so important and relevant for the heritage industry today. You can see some small pictures of people who I think are part of the culture. For instance, you can see the second picture. You see Saoud Jama. He is he has a streetwear shop, a fashion shop in Amsterdam. It's called The Other Guys, but also on the left bottom, you can see Fatima Essa, also someone who is part of the culture, all people with different backgrounds and all makers, creators, also entrepreneurs. And with this, I've prepared a few slides, and in the end, hopefully, you will also agree that it's an important and relevant group, but also how you can attract them and how you can keep them within the organization. Because as an advisor, diversity and inclusion, that's my challenge, to make them part of the heritage industry and use their skills because they are so important. Okay, let's start. I've broken this program down in 3 parts. First, I would like to start with the definition of the culture, and then tell you about how they can give more access to new networks. We have, of course, the 4 Ps in our industry, and I'm talking about the P of partnerships, and also what kind of skills they can bring in within heritage institutions. And then I'm also referring to the P of personnel or staff. That's even better. Also, Wim, at a certain point in the presentation, I have a question for the audience. I can see you there. I can only hear, hopefully, someone. So, Wim, maybe you can ask someone in the audience to answer my question, if it's possible. Maybe someone on your left or right hand. Is that okay? I hope that's okay. I'll continue. The culture, definition and relevance. So what is it exactly? I've made an attempt, it's difficult, to define the culture, and it's as follows. The culture is an ecosystem that consists of a large group, mostly young and successful creatives, and entrepreneurs. Their forms of expression, such as design, fashion, music, film, and art, are influenced by cultures from all over the world and strongly rooted in a post-colonial urban identity. And what they do is about being proud of who you are and where you come from, but also telling and embracing other stories and inspiring young people that dreams can become a reality. So this is actually a definition made by a colleague of mine from the UNESCO Commission, because we talked about the culture a lot, and we're also busy with an advice about the relevance and importance of the culture. This is more or less an attempt to define that specific target group or group. This is a pie chart that I used when I was working at the Van Gogh Museum. This pie chart is an overview of all the young adults between 18 and 30 years old living in Amsterdam. More than 200,000 of these young adults live in Amsterdam. And as you can see, you have a big part of white Amsterdam young adults, and then it's broken down into smaller groups. And what I mean with the culture is that this group is so interconnected by means of culture, but also what they like. And this interconnectedness, that's typically what a culture is. I said street soccer in the beginning of my introduction. I talked about hip hop, but also bubbling, all these subcultures. It's so it's a mixture of a lot of things. And I think that's what the culture is about. It's also a mindset to help each other, to support each other. And in big cities or city areas like Amsterdam, the culture is really present, and that makes them very relevant for companies, but also heritage institutions. Daddy Paper, for instance, is also part of the culture, but also a brand like Pata, Finnick Pieces. So it's an important group, and a big group, mostly in the bigger cities of the Netherlands. So very shortly, something about Van Gogh Connects, because that's why I learned a lot about diversity and inclusion. And it was the 4-year research program focused on how we can, how the museum could be more relevant for Amsterdam young people with a bicultural background. And it was done with the target group, so co-creation was very important. And we worked with all kinds of departments, marketing, HR, hospitality, and it was also a way of measuring impact. So we did all kinds of activities and tried to measure what these activities did with just these bicultural young adults. Could they feel more at home, for instance? or did they felt more connected with the museum? Those were all things that we were trying to find. And I showed you this pie chart. So it is again important to understand that when I talk about the culture, what Jeffrey is trying to say is that it's not only the Surinamese, Turkish, or Moroccan, but it's more the mixture and the interconnectedness between all these groups. So the question I still have and was having at that time is, how can heritage institutions utilize and retain people from this culture, and especially in terms of audience, but also staff? Because yeah, that's something at the end of my presentation I'll zoom into more about staff, and both areas are so important. And when I was working at the museum, we actually had 4 strategies to attract them and to keep them within the organizations. And I'll focus on the 3rd and the 4th part, partnerships and the diversity bonus. I'm not sure if anyone has heard from it, but it's something that I find very, very interesting. But I'll start with the first 2, the cultural identification and co-creation. Because what we did already 6 years ago was to hire tour guides with bicultural backgrounds. For instance, on the right, you can see Irie Samblé. Now, she's a well-known painter, lives in Paris, and she gave painting workshops to secondary vocational students, MBO studenten. And it was a great success. And all of the students said, well, it's great that we can work with someone who we can identify with. So that was the first important thing that we did, to work with the culture. And also we work with these people, the bill breakers. In English, it's called the reframers. They still exist today. My former colleague, Ghislaine Tromp, is working with them, and they give advice related to marketing, but also HR, social media, all kinds of disciplines. And then also, what I like is that they could be seen as potential new colleagues. So this is also a way to surround yourself with, as a heritage institution, to surround yourself with the culture, just to work with them. And this way of working is in an advisory board. So now I'm coming to the center of my presentation, new networks. I think it's one of the, next to the P of personnel or staff, the most important one. And I've seen that happening in a collaboration that the Van Gogh Museum did with Daily Paper. And in this collaboration, I actually saw Hussein by accident at a party, and I asked him, would you like to work with us? Because we see that Daily Paper has this very mixed customer base. They're in the culture, and the museum would like to embrace that target as well. So what we did, it was actually his idea, was to come up with this clothing line. You can see 3 pictures of this clothing line, and it was a great success. A lot of PR was around it, as you can see, Forbes, but also Hypebeast, more streetwear blogs. They wrote about this collaboration. But the most important thing is this. We also had a night, we can call it a release party, where we showed the clothing line. And I still remember today that the vibe and the whole, the vibe, I think the vibe that's the best word, was so great, and the culture was really in the house of the Van Gogh Museum, and it was I think one of the most culturally mixed evenings that I've ever been to. And with that partnership, it doesn't, it's 2 things. Of course, you have the target group in your location or institution, but also still a lot of young adults from the culture still remember that evening as being awesome, great, but also inspiring. And they also said that, yeah, that those kind of partnerships or things should be done more often. Connecting fashion with art, connecting the culture with a big institution like the Van Gogh Museum. The next part of my presentation, the third part, is next to partnerships, the most important one, because what I see is that our industry is lacking important skills. And this is the moment that, Wim, I need you, but I'm not sure if it's going to work because I don't hear, I don't receive any feedback, so maybe this is not working.
Can you hear? Well, he can't hear anything, so he can't hear
Yes.
me, right? You
Yes,
can hear me. So
yes.
try.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Well, maybe I can do it with you now, because this is a small riddle. So this is the riddle. You can see 3 puppets or persons, and each of these persons has an amount of abilities. We can see on the left N with an ability of 5. You can see the types of ability that N has: A, B, C, D, and E. And next to and we have Barry with 4 abilities: A, B, E, and F. And then we have Cam. Cam has only 3 abilities: C, D, and G. And now the question, Wim, for you is, if you were to hire 2 of these 3 puppets or persons, which couple would you choose?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot right now. Thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome, of course. Is it like Anne or Barry with Cam, or Anne with Cam? I would like to hear 2 names, please.
I would go with Barry and Cam, actually. And
And
this
what-
is, I have to be honest, Barry always, because it's the name Barack Obama had as a child.
Oh, okay.
And Cam, yes, definitely.
And why are you choosing for Barry and Cam, Wim?
Well, I think Cam has potential, so they can grow. And I say they because it could be both Cameron or Cammy or something else, right? Barry also has potential to grow because he's in the middle. So I would definitely, if I want my institution to grow and to develop, to go with people who have abilities to grow, rather than I'm sorry about it, to have someone who basically has it all already.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't go with the safest combination.
Thank you, Wim, and very interesting answer, feedback. And the next slide is like the answer. It's from a book called The Diversity Bonus. It's written by Scott Page. He is a professor. And what he says is that the best team does not consist of the 2 highest ability people. And the 2 highest ability people in this case were Anne and Barry. Together they have this team ability of 6. And Barry and Cam, and that's, I think, Wim, your answer is, together they have the biggest team ability, and that's 7. But what I often see is that, just like you said, Wim, is that organizations, not only our heritage industry, is preferring people like Anne, whether it's I don't know, a person like M, because that person has so many abilities, and yeah, it's the best person. But the starting point, of course, is to know what your team is about in terms of abilities. What do you have already in your organization or in your house, so to speak, and use that starting point as a way of, okay, what kind of skills and people do we need to bring in? And that's where the diversity bonus is an interesting theory to choose in this example for Cam, even though Cam has an ability of 3. And this whole theory is interesting because one of the previous speakers was now I forgot her name, and I was with Sila, of course. Yeah, Sila. Hi Sila, if you're there. And I know a while ago, Sila and I were part of research done by a significant APE in Dutch. And this is what was stated in the research, that an average of 30% of the staff of cultural institutions has a Western migration background. Personnel of cultural institutions therefore more often have a Western migration background than the average in the Dutch working population. People with a non-Western migration background, on the other hand, are underrepresented in cultural institutions compared to the Dutch working population. And moreover, and this is, I think, the most interesting part, moreover, employees with a non-Western migration background are less likely to hold management positions. This is an article. I hope that you can see my screen properly. This is an interview from an article from Willem Vissers. He's a reporter at the Volkskrant, and he wrote this article about the limited promotion of colored or black trainers at Ajax, football club Ajax. And as you can see, the current, but also the previous managers were all white males, and the football players like Glenn Seedorf or Edgar Davids, who all have this amazing track record as a player, also at Ajax, but also international track record. They have like this limited promotion within a club, within Ajax. So this is a great example. Is a current example is that Michael Reiziger is also leaving. He has left Ajax already, and now he's working at the KNVB, the Dutch Football Association. So and I think this is so sad that not only in our heritage industry, but also, as we can see in the football industry, these things are still happening, even though all these players have played with each other, have the same, I think, qualities, but still the one is preferred and the other is not. So back to our industry, young professionals with a non-Western migration background are less likely to advance within an organization, and what is needed to guide them, and what is needed to pay more attention to the influx, the instroom, but also the promotion, doorstroom, and exit, uitstroom of diverse talent in organizations. So I've thought about it a lot. And one of the things that I'm doing right now is developing a program in which young professionals with a non-Western background who work in the profit, but also in the non-profit industry, that they can invest more in themselves and can continue to develop. And the aim of this program is to make their characteristic skills and competencies even bigger and stronger. And it keeps them motivated, valuable, and competent. And the way it's done is to collect and share knowledge from different perspectives, from peer to peer, but also by personal coaching. And the main question is, Wim, is how do I stay put with my organization and promote to a management position? Something that is, as we can see at Ajax, but also in different industries, is still not the case. So a few months ago, I had this meeting in Utrecht at Fonds 21, and I asked like 10 people with non-Western migration backgrounds to join this meeting. And I asked them this, it was about this whole program and the lack of promotion from people of color to these management positions. And I asked them, what do you consider as a bicultural skill? I talked about Cam in the diversity bonus example. And CAM had three skills or abilities, C, D, and G. And what I often see is that, well, that's my approach, is that those skills from CAM can also be a bicultural skill, right? And that can make an organization stronger or more valuable. But then we need to consider it as something strong and valuable. So I asked these people during the meeting, what do you consider as a bicultural skill? And these were their answers, like adaptability, observational skills, even being politically correct, having patience, being open to others, etc., etc. These are things that they possess because of the fact they have a non-Western bicultural background. So to close this presentation, the culture can help our industry because they can create more new networks, and they have all kinds of new skills, as mentioned earlier. And these four strategies: cultural identification, co-creation, partnerships, and especially that diversity bonus, are four ways to do that. Of course, it's not new, but I think the combination of these four, and especially giving value to these bicultural skills, is something that our industry should do. And in that way, we can really attract, retain, and make this our industry more effective and more valuable. So this is for me just an overall message of making the culture clear and making clear what it can mean for our industry. Thank you for this. This is my closing slide, as you can see, and I'm done. Thank you so much, and I'll take back the screen.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Martin, for a very clear presentation, basically a roadmap, and also bringing out possibilities. I really liked the title of your presentation, The Culture. I was thinking about the weekend, and I thought if I would be an artist, I would call myself The Culture. But thank you also for bringing out some of these, let's say, challenging, right, boxes that we sometimes use. People with a non-Western migration background. And we are talking about people who were born and raised in the Netherlands. And what is the distinction? These distinctions change over time. They basically tell you very little about who you are facing in your organization or as a potential colleague in your organization. Now, we have limited time, and I would like to focus or give the opportunity to the people who were joining us online, because I did see some things coming up on the screen. And so I probably need some help from someone from the organization to read out if there were any questions that are pertinent to our program. Were there any questions for Martin regarding his presentation, or was it crystal clear? And I'm now looking at, and I'm now walking towards, because my eyesight is definitely not 20/20. Are there any? Okay, so for the online audience, it was crystal clear. How about you? And now everybody's feeling, I'm not going to ask anything but any questions? I see one hand here and then yours up front. Yes.
Yeah, hey, Martin. I first want to say that, nice to see you, about like the culture. Could you also say that like the culture, you can refer that to community building, because you're really collecting a lot of people and they are creating with each other. So there's a certain connection.
Sorry, the last part I didn't understand. Can you repeat that, please?
Could you say that the culture that you can refer also to community building?
Yeah, good. Well, by the way, I can't see who's talking because I'm just seeing myself now, but I recognize your voice, by the way, person who speaks.
Ja, die staat ook dicht bij mij. Ja, dat is goed. Wil je ook iets vinden?
People talking right now, but to give an answer to your question, yeah, community building, it's a community that is building itself and is giving
Just keep talking, Martin. Just keep talking.
okay, yeah, just keep talking. All right. It's a community that is really supporting each other as well. And sorry, I'm hearing people, so it's difficult to talk.
Sorry about this.
Ik hou ook zo van niet aan.
So I was saying it's a community that's building itself, and that's something very important. That empowerment to each other, but also it's like a demograph, which is difficult to make it like om te begrenzen, to make it like fixed. When I referred to that moment that Jefferson was talking, he said that, yeah, we as entrepreneurs, we also support other designers and other artists and other people because we see that these doors are closed to them. So we want to help them as well. And that whole sense of helping out each other, that's one of the conditions or one of the features for the culture. So yeah, you can see it as community building, but it's built by the people from within the culture, if you know what I mean.
Thank you, Martin. There was one question over here, right? Or, okay. Because of time concern, and I'm sure you will be wanting to talk to the speakers, but also to one another, thinking about what has been shared in both presentations. And thank you, Martin, for bringing out demographic developments, whereas Dutch society is changing, not only in the big cities, where, for instance, in Amsterdam, since 2011, we have a majority-minority city where there's no group that is dominating anymore. So that has immediate consequences for what, for instance, cultural institutions, when they think about the future, need to think about, obviously, but it's not only happening in the west of the country, in the Randstad, but also happening throughout the Netherlands, right? Absolutely. To see that as a challenge rather than as a threat is also what Martin shared with us. So again, Martin, thank you so much for bringing out this element, but also bringing out the strength and the possibilities. Now, before we go into a well-deserved break, I want to give you some practical information about the breakout sessions that you will go to. But before I do that, please, again, a round of applause for Martin. Martin van Engel, thank you so much.
Thank you too, and good luck, Wim. Bye-bye.
Okay. And from now on, Martin, you will be Martin the Culture van Engel. It sounds cool to me. So after the break, you will be going to breakout sessions. You all got 2 stickers with a particular color, one specifying your breakout session in round 1, and then one for round 2. Now, these breakout sessions are spread throughout the building, but as the break comes to an end, there will be intriguing sound. I will not spoil the mystery. And then the wonderful staff of Mondriaan will be in front of the stage holding up colors. And so in this case, you will not follow the money, but follow the color. And they will guide you through the building to join sessions, breakout sessions. And please think about what both speakers have shared with you And I do think that will inform the conversation. So there will be a session on the ethical dilemmas in fundraising, chaired by Joanne van Ooyen. How from volunteer to friend to donor, how volunteers with a bicultural diasporic background give and can give. This is chaired by Malika Washa. Then there is a session on community building chaired by Alfreda Martis. The Muslim Archive will also present, and that's Aliyah Azoui and Kashif Amin. And there will be a session on oral history. So collecting stories, in this case, particular stories dealing with queer culture on Dutch merchant ships in the 1950s through the 1980s. And that session will be chaired by Bob van der Pol. So enjoy your refreshments in the back of the room and also in the cafe, and be mindful of the sound. And then if you're colorblind, just ask a neighbor, follow the color. See you in a bit. Thank you very much.
Mute. Kan iedereen mij horen? In de breakout rooms, wat jullie allemaal rechts onderin kunnen vinden, staan een aantal kamers waar jullie vrij naartoe kunnen lopen. Ik kan jullie hierbij begeleiden, maar jullie kunnen ook zelf zo meteen naar de kamers gaan. De pauze duurt zo een 15 minuten. Dus iets over 3 zullen de breakout rooms starten. Ik blijf paraat voor vragen.
Being in the room again after 2 rounds of inspiring and vibrant breakout sessions. The staff of the Mondriaan Fonds have been making notes, and we have all the speakers here in front. So let me just kick off by giving a quick overview with some of the, well, highlights. Of course, there's too much to go into detail, but you will have the opportunity to ask questions or remark on some of the things that you learned or had to unlearn, obviously, because that is also part of the process when you were participating in those breakout sessions. So when we start with the breakout session that took place in this big hall on ethical funding, so how to do that, one of the things that came up repeatedly was the necessity of formulating a policy, because otherwise it becomes something that depends on what an individual or several people within an organization think is the right thing to do and the right way to go. So to formulate a policy is important, to be transparent. And actually, we wrote down that whenever there is a potential giver, send them the policy and be transparent and communicate that policy. It's also important that, and there is no one set in stone policy. that in individual cases, the policy should basically communicate with what your institution is all about, right? And so, because that is the best way that you can actually explain, communicate, and talk and discuss when you talk about funding, which funders you might be welcoming, which funders you might be a little bit more hesitant about. So that is, these are some of the things that came up in the session about ethical funding. Again, much more was discussed, and perhaps if there are particular questions, we can address them because speakers are with us in the room. When we talk about community building, one of the things that came up repeatedly is the fact that community building is not a one-off event. You need to invest, you need to be willing to commit yourself in the long term when you engage with the community. The community must, and of course, to know a community, to get to know a community is not just invite people over coffee or tea. So community work, community building is essential to your work as an institution. And so you should also think about compensation towards people who invest their time, their particular knowledge that you do not have as an institution, to share with you. And should that always be free? Big question mark. So a commitment to be sincere, obviously, to also talk about expectations. That are these are some of the keys of successful community building. And of course, always be aware that there is no such thing as one monolithic community, right? As our present queen said when she was finding her way into Dutch society, the Dutch person does not exist. De Nederlander bestaat niet, right? And she was very popular. It was one of the few occasions where many, well, what might say traditional Oranje fans were critical towards her, when I think she was actually telling something that was very significant. So the Dutch person, de Nederlander, does not exist, nor does the Muslim. And this was something that came up in the session about the Muslim archive, that its goal is to basically bring out the diversity within the community of people who self-identify or are identified as Muslims. And it is important to investigate all kinds of images and stereotypes that are there, and then to unpack those stereotypes. And one way to do that is through building an archive. And then of course, there was a question, why a separate archive? Why not join a city archive or a regional archive or even a national archive? Well, sometimes it is important that there is an archive that is founded on an idea that there has to be a voice from within, a very diverse voice, but still a separate voice, not an add-on or a subsection to a broader institution or an archive. That does not preclude cooperation, obviously, but an own voice is sometimes important. And that message definitely resonated with me, because I do think that besides changing mainstream institutions, to have your own institution is also very important. Now, one of the things that cultural institutions tend to, if they have no experience or very little experience, we can hardly reach out to people to come and join us for our activities, to become volunteers. But then, of course, the question you should ask yourself as an institution, taking back this issue on positionality, do I actually know the people that I want to reach? Again, you need to invest time. You need to be committed to get to know people, to build a relation, and then you can ask people to help out. And especially when it comes to people with a diasporic, bicultural background, you really need to try to learn, to be willing to learn what they think your institution represents and why they would be willing to invest their time, effort, and their way of committing themselves to your institution, and not only think, how can I use these people? Because one of the terms that came up in one of the sessions that I think is incredibly important was parasitic outreach. Basically, as an institution, you see communities, you see people, and you say, how can I use them? You don't think about a relation that is really based upon equity, another term that Sila mentioned in her presentation, but is basically based upon exploitation, right? So when we think about communities that have been underrepresented, we can also think about other ways of knowing. And if we look at archives, more often than not, they have a particular bias, because archives, museums, and here I get to think about an esteemed colleague from the Amsterdam Museum, Annemarie de Wild, who used to show up, and perhaps she still does, in a beautiful t-shirt, museums are not neutral, right? And so we have to let go of that idea of neutrality, because it is actually a toxic notion. Neutrality is a position that you can afford if you are privileged. But sometimes then you need to have other methodologies. And this was something that was highlighted in the section, in the breakout session on oral history. How sometimes oral histories are necessary to incorporate heritage. So in this case, immaterial heritage, to find out stories that have not been centered, but have been sidelines. So in this case, queer culture on board of ships. I have to admit, this was something that was completely new to me. So thank you, Bob, for bringing this in, and how this was actually a vibrant culture. So all in all, I do think that all the sessions have been extremely valuable, and the report will be there thanks to, again, the efforts of the people from Mondriaan. But I can imagine that there are still things that you could not ask, or you didn't think you could ask during the sessions, and now the time is yours. And I'm not saying that, you know, this is the only thing that will separate you from the bottle, but it is about, you know, you can be sure that you can drink the bottle more satisfied if you have posed your question rather than keeping it to yourself. Of course, you can also ask the question during the bottle. There are two mics. And so is there anyone, also for those of you who are joining us online, anyone who would like to either ask or comment? Perhaps, you know, you were assured that you're on the right track, or perhaps you, after being here and listening to the lectures, but also participating in the breakout sessions, you say, well, I need to come back and to talk with my institution, because we need to really reevaluate the way that we are working. Any thoughts? People are looking at me and say, you know, bottle, no, but please, can I? And you know, I'm a teacher, so when the class is really quiet, I slowly mosey down the room, and I go up to a person and say, I don't want to embarrass you, right? So any questions, remarks? Great. Malika, let me see. Oh, Mara, thank you.
It's funny that you use the example as a teacher, because I do the same with my students. So I'm turning to my students, who are the institutions. So who learned something totally new today? That was the question. That was the question. Anybody wants to say something?
Hello. I think for me the funding or the foundation kind of planning. I have to look at my sure. Fine. I was looking. Maybe this is actually a question back because I was about to actually ask a question, and I have to find it because I write a lot. Wow, I wish I could actually read my own handwriting. Yeah, this was something for the I think this is the code of ethical dilemmas in fundraising. Yes, okay, now we're here. Something that I've learned was that there was like something you have to take care of in the situation of when you're fundraising and how you kind of screen fundings kind of on things that are unethical, and how do you kind of manage to kind of, do you stay composed, or do you take time to kind of go over the process of you know, discontinuing, or do you continue with, do you go to new sponsors? And some of the things I kind of learned or kind of saw was like, okay, maybe there's more questions about it. How can I kind of actively contact in the future new policies that you think, okay, we have to screen funds or people or sponsors, sorry, screen sponsors on what they did historically or in the future. And if we need kind of like a combination of a board or whatever, or a group of people to kind of screen, where does the money come from, and in what way do you tackle that if you find something out? And I was also getting a little bit worried about small or beginning institutions on how to kind of tackle that. If you get money, it's super great to have, but then you find out something that you wouldn't want to find out. It makes me thinking in that way. So it's something new I learned, or not. It's actually, I have much more questions now. But that's very important, I think, because we talked about, I think, Joanna, about what to do if something in the future changes with a sponsor. And that was one of the examples with Heineken in Russia, I think you said. But, you know, in the past, Heineken could have had connections that were also quite bad. And how do you tackle with that if you don't have like a historical know-how, let's say, as a small beginner? Yeah, that is it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And, you know, if you were a student, you would get points for making so many notes that you actually have to look up this question. So very good. But perhaps, Joanne, if I may, let me see whether, does this work, or can it, because it was actually a question directed to you guys, right? So here you go. Let's see.
Let me just see if I understood the question correctly. Did you mean to ask if it is also necessary to investigate a potential sponsor's past and how far you should go? Well, that would probably depend on, first of all, if you think that really matters. Everyone, perhaps people and also organizations, are entitled to make changes for the better, I would think. And secondly, it will depend also very practically on the amount of people and hours that you can spend on that, because you could put a whole research team on investigating sponsors' paths, of course. So that's a practical limitation on that, I'm afraid. Is that any type of answer? Or, yeah?
For now. Thank you. So to be continued. So, you know, there's a good Dutch proverb, als er één schaap over de dam is. So, you know, who would like to, or comment, or perhaps I should then, if nobody raises their hand, I should start to, do I, oh, there is a hand, sorry.
Hi, thank you. I have a question for the first keynote speaker, Sheila, I think. I don't know. I was wondering because she sometimes mentioned that she knows who she is and she knows her own positionality, but I started to wonder, can you ever fully know your own positionality? And I was wondering, so.
Sila had to leave our meeting, so, but you asked a very philosophical question. But I do think when we talk about positionality in society, when we talk about power, for people like Sila and others, often we do not have the luxury to not think about our positionality. And so her invitation to us all was basically to think first and foremost about our position in society. So if we look at ourselves, do we embody all kinds of elements within our identity that basically give us a head start, or at least preclude us of thinking about how to behave, how to act in certain situations or not? And it is not, and this is, I think, and this is what she meant, this is not a way of guilting white people. This is a way of basically raising awareness that each and every one of us embody a position in society. And you can use your quote unquote privilege for the good, right? So I think that might be the kind of answer Sila might give. And I have to be careful, because otherwise I am, and I have the fortune of marrying a Black feminist, she would say, you are mansplaining, right? And that is definitely something that I don't want to do. So is there anyone else who would like? Yes. No, I'm closer, so I'll just come to you. But I will act as if I had a hengel, and I will hold the microphone.
Thank you, Wim. Oh, it's not something I learned anew, but something that struck me again during Sila's presentation, which is that oftentimes when in our institutions bring up the subjects of inclusivity, diversity, equity, sometimes we meet a little bit of resistance, but on where these three concepts converse, there is a sweet spot. And it's called belonging. And belonging is just such a wonderful term that if we all embrace that, I think that could bring all of our institutions a lot further. Belonging is the term to use.
Thank you, belonging. Now, our speakers, is there anyone who would like to respond to this notion of belonging? And I know you touched upon this in your sessions, but perhaps you would like to, for the plenary session, who would like to comment on this notion of belonging as being a strategy or a way forward, rather than, and of course, sometimes awkwardness is necessary to be killjoy, but belonging, who would like to, and now you are basically also the, yeah, because I still have to.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. Very well organized today. And with Aliyah, I had a session from the Muslim archives And if we're talking about belonging and talking about sense of belonging, which is extremely important, because a Muslim archive can have the function of actually collecting a lot of cultural heritage, but it can also play an emancipatory role and create a sense of belonging. Now, sometimes Muslims are perceived as being a weird other entity, but obviously, if you look at the history, we can go back to Indonesia, for example. It has always been a part of the Dutch kingdom, and it's also about what narrative do you want to talk about, and what narrative do you want to bring forward. And hopefully, the Muslim archive will be successful in bringing different narratives forward and create a sense of belonging to a lot of people who perhaps do believe that they are not from here or have a strange entity. In fact, a Muslim archive can actually tell about the history and create a sense of belonging. And from the corner of my eye, I think Malika actually agrees with me.
I will ask her. Malika.
I don't. And I don't because I cannot decide to what or towards what someone feels a certain sense of belonging. I can aim for it. I can do whatever I want for my guests to feel welcome. But if that is not enough for them to feel welcome, then they have to tell me what they need. And I think that's the problem in today's society, that you said mansplaining. Okay, you guys stop talking, which is okay to a certain extent because you still matter. I think that everybody needs to have an equal position in order for them to tell you what they need. Individuals need to tell institutions what they need, and the institution needs to listen and see what they can do in order for them to create safety and space for that sense of belonging to be embodied by whatever is needed. And I think it's very dangerous to say that we can create a sense of belonging because you may think that you are creating it, but I'm still the one who's telling you that you do or you don't. We have the same in academia. Women should feel welcome. We are the ones who are going to tell you if we feel welcome or not. We're going to tell you. You can't tell that for us. And I think that's the thing also in, if you think about what you said during ethics, who are we to say that something is ethically good or not? You know, that's also one narrative. And I just keep, smashing on that you can't speak on behalf of someone, and especially not when it comes to belonging. That's something very deep.
The main point is this. First of all, the Muslim archive is a place where we collect. And what I said, it can function and can emancipate. But then again, I totally agree with you. It's up to the person. But that's not the objective. The objective is to collect, and it's a byproduct. It can emancipate, but then again, it's a possibility, exactly. It's not one of the main, it's not an objective.
So it's more aspirational, but what you are saying, Malika, is I think important for any cultural institution. Not only the willingness, but the feeling, the necessity of really listening and treating the other person as an equal. Even though they might not have the institutional power, they might not have the positionality that brings them power, you still need to take them seriously and listen what they have to say and not say, and this is of course, I think, one of the pitfalls, but I mean so well. Ik bedoel het zo goed. That is not enough. And I think if we learn something today is that our intentions are of course important, but what we do, and especially the fact that we listen, are willing to also self-reflect, which is not always easy, is I think very important. And thank you for bringing this out. So anyone who would like to? Yes.
So just to expand on what Malika said, instead of that the people have to tell the institution should be open for what the people tell as well. So not only a side, one side, so it has to be from the institution to be open to listen to the people, because I don't have to tell you, but you can be open for me to tell you something if I want to.
Thank you very much for this important addition, right? Where institutions, because of their institutional privilege, have to do the work rather than saying, well, you know, share your pain. So I see your hand, but I also see, so yes.
I just wanted to add that I think it goes to an earlier point before the workshops, before breakout groups, that it's never ending. You're never there. And you always need to kind of keep asking or keep being open to hear the questions and keep asking the questions and keep, you know, you think you may, oh, we're here, we've got this, we're now inclusive, but that there's always more subgroups or more levels of inclusivity that can be achieved. And even, you know, you think you're there and you may be good, but it's always an ever-changing active thing, and never you know, just as saying it's active. Yeah.
Thank you. The work is never done and needs to be done all the time and continuously. Perhaps, is there anyone from the speakers who would like to comment or build on that before we go to that the work is never done? Is that something that perhaps makes you feel tired? Oh, sorry. Yes, here you go.
Oh yeah, you can.
Yes.
I want to add on the aspect of emotional labor, because in all these established institutions, there's a lot of emotional labor being done by predominantly medewerkers of color, and many of whom aren't in management positions. And when they are trying to establish new relationships with community platforms, this also trickles down into people within the community having to do emotional labor in order for this relationship to work. And I think institutions should really become aware of that and also account for it when they reach out and ask people to do work for them. So how do you account for that in your budget, in your agreement with said community platform or individual? I think that's very, very important and often overlooked.
Thank you very much. A very important addition, that the emotional labor is hard and that one cannot just say, well, you know, just share your pain. This is not ethical in any way. So is there a question out there in the back of the room? Going once. Twice. If not, perhaps it's now time for some famous last words. And I'm now looking at Mondriaan Fonds. Would you like to share, perhaps, because people have been sharing both in the breakout sessions, but also now. Is there something that you would like to convey to the audience? Your impressions, things that you learned, perhaps things that you feel we have to unlearn. Welcome. Yes, I will.
I can't hold the microphone either. It's difficult. There's a lot is being said, but I think one thing you said when you concluded in the beginning, that you said that discourse shouldn't be taken for granted, and it should be essential. And one thing I picked up today in the conversations in the different sessions, I felt that people felt that they were looking for essential dialogue. And that was it's sort of connected to what you just said as well. It has to be essential. And I think obviously there's a very long road still to go, and it will never end. That in itself is not necessarily a bad thing, because as we said in the beginning, heritage is something that evolves. It's something that that's dynamic. So are we. So we will always have to have a discussion, and it's important those discussions are essential. And I'd like to thank you as well for bringing that also well together just now.
Thank you very much. I think this is now the time to start thanking our host, the Openbare Bibliotheek in Utrecht, because to be able to have a conversation like this in a beautiful building with its own history, and can you imagine that it was empty for a while because people, the city of Utrecht, did not know what to do with it. And obviously it's now a very important community center. Basically people come in, go and read, have meetings in the library, which is, of course is wonderful. Also, everyone who contributed to this event, Rapti and her team definitely did a wonderful job. Naima Abdi, who is abroad, who was essential also in conceptualizing this meeting. And of course, all our wonderful speakers and also everyone who was in the tech room. Thank you very much for helping us out. And basically the best thing to do now is to continue the conversation during the borrel, which is definitely a Dutch tradition, right? The borrel. And hopefully, if you're inviting people and saying, we want to not only pay them, but give them a present, a bottle of wine is not always the best present to have ready, because I have been given numerous bottles of wine, and friends and family members are thankful for that. I don't drink. So there are more creative ways of finding presents, like the beautiful étui we all got. And so again, on behalf of the Mondriaan Fonds, thank you very much. The report will be there, right? A form of report, so to say. Presentations will be available. So hopefully you can be continuing the conversation in your own institution or with your peers or with your students or with your friends. And obviously we hope to see you again at a future event by the Mondriaan Fonds. So thank you very much for coming out and enjoy the borrel.